Welcome back, guys. Today from Flight Sim Academy, we are flying the Boeing 787. We are going to have a look at the primary flight display, the Autopilot flight director system, and a brief introduction to climbing and descending using the Autopilot. So, without further ado then, today we are cruising at an altitude of 15,000 feet or flight level 150, and we're doing speed 280 knots. So looking at our primary flight display down here, we can see on the left hand side in our speed tape we are doing about 280 knots and an altimeter 15,000 feet thereabouts, or flight level 150. Now, the primary flight display here, we've got the artificial horizon in the background, and on the left hand side, I've already mentioned, we've got our speed tape there. In the top left, we have our commanded airspeed. We've asked the MCP to maintain a speed of 280 knots. So therefore, here, our commanded speed is showing at 280 knots. Our actual speed is 280 knots as well. The auto thrust and autopilot system is doing a good job of maintaining 280 knots. This magenta bug here is a visual representation of our commanded airspeed of 280 knots. This green bug here is what we call the up speed. It's our minimum clean speed. This is computed from the FMC based on the weight of the aircraft, and it's basically the minimum safe speed that we can go without extending our flaps. If we want to slow down below that, we will have to extend our flaps. But in the cruise, we'll be having flaps up. At the bottom of our speed tape here is a Mach number. That's our actual Mach number. So at this flight level of flight level 150, speed 280 knots, with these atmospheric conditions, our Mach number at the moment is 0.543. Similarly, on the right hand side, our altimeter. At the top we have our commanded altitude of 15,000 feet, which you can see has been set in our MCP window. This is our altimeter tape. Again, we have the visual representation of the commanded flight level. This is our actual altimeter readout here, 14,900 feet. And this is as good as the autopilot is on the 787 in Flight Simulator at the moment. There's a bit of discrepancies there between what you're commanding and what the autopilot achieves for you. On the right hand side is our vertical speed indicator. When we begin climbing and descending very shortly, you'll see this needle here start to move up or down depending on the rate of our climb. Okay, the rest of the primary flight display is very important as well. We've got these magenta crosshairs here. They are the flight directors. We switch them on and off with this switch up here. And this green bit here, which says AP, that tells us that the autopilot is engaged. Now, if you can see here, if I disengage the autopilot by clicking on the AP button, we get the oral warning, and we also have this change to flight directors. So when I got the autopilot back in here, it says autopilot here. Now, these enunciations that I've mentioned to you, and these ones up here, will be the most important ones you have whilst using the autopilot on the 787. This bit at the top is called the flight mode annunciator. It's split into three bits. The left bit is for the thrust mode, the middle bit is for the roll mode, and the right hand side bit is for the pitch mode. Now, depending on which mode you're selecting to go up or down or left or right or even hold an altitude, you'll have different enunciations in these windows. We'll go through them quickly now. On the left hand side, in the thrust mode annunciator, it says speed. That says that the auto throttle is maintaining our airspeed for us. If I change this here, I'll try and increase it to 300 knots. In this mode, you'll see that the commanded airspeed has changed to 300 knots. The bug has moved up. Thrust is coming up here, as you can see on the right hand side, and we're increasing speed to about 300 knots. So that's how you connect the thrust levers or throttles to the autopilot, is via the thrust mode annunciation. Here we've got heading hold in the roll mode, and this is a roll mode that you have on some of the newer Boeings like the 777, 787 and the 747. It's just to hold a particular heading. Now if you want to change it, you're going to have to click on the heading select button, and that is the middle of this knob here, and it should change it by clicking on it to heading select. So I've just gone ahead and clicked on it now, and it's changed our roll mode to heading select. The difference between heading hold and heading select is that in heading select you can change the heading that you're on. On heading hold it just maintains your heading at the moment, the heading that you were on at the moment that you pushed it. So we're currently heading 110 degrees, and if I turn this knob here, adjust selected heading, if I turn it over to 120, you'll see we'll start to turn onto heading 120 degrees. That's pretty straightforward. In the roll mode you can just change whichever heading you want, but make sure you're in heading select, not heading hold. If I change it to heading hold, it will just hold somewhere in the middle. I asked for 120, it's making about 115. If I change it back to heading select, it should continue the right turn round, as you can see here, onto heading 120, where our magenta bug is on our little nav display and our expanded map display up here. So heading select is a very basic mode. I highly recommend it. If you're under time pressure and you haven't matched your heading, or if your heading bug, for example, is pointing completely off the scale here or here, you can just use heading hold initially and then change to heading select. As for the right-hand side part of the flight mode annunciator, we're currently in alt mode, which is almost a kind of altitude hold capability. The autopilot is holding us at 15,000 feet. Now, if we want to change levels, the first thing we need to do is change the altitude selector to a different level. Notice, first of all, I'm going to scroll this up to flight level 200. First thing you'll notice is that the commanded flight level has changed here to flight level 200. We haven't started climbing or descending yet. The vertical speed is flat at 0, and we're still at 14,900. But pre-selected we have flight level 200. Now the easiest way to get from flight level 150, where we are now, up to flight level 200 is to use this mode here called flight level change. Once you've selected your new level, just go ahead and press flight level change. Now the aircraft will then, with the autopilot engaged, will then climb or descend to your new level. You know it's happening because of the flight mode annunciator up here. So the thrust mode has changed to thrust breadth. You'll see the thrust is increasing, so that is the auto throttle adding thrust for you for your climb. You'll see the pitch mode has changed to flight level change speed. It was old before, but now it's changed. So that means in the pitch axis, the aircraft is going to pitch up to maintain the airspeed that we asked for. Airspeed was 300 knots, as you can see up here. If I change the speed during the climb, I'll reduce it to 290 knots, you'll see the aircraft pitches up. As you can see that out the window here, and you can also see it on the primary flight display. The result of that is we have an increased climb rate. Okay, so there's about 2,000 feet to go. As we start to get nearer to flight level 200, you'll see that the rate of climb, currently at 4,000 feet a minute, will start to reduce. And when we do level off, the flight mode annunciator will change to what we had before. The thrust should change back to speed mode, and the pitch mode should change back to alt mode to hold flight level 200 for us. And what you notice is that when they do change, you get a green box around the mode annunciation. The green box is a built-in feature to alert you to a change in one of the modes. The green box lasts for 10 seconds and is there purely to alert you. People often ask, what is the plane doing now? What you have to do is read your FMA, your flight mode annunciator. So we're going to read that now. Thrust mode has gone back to speed, and the pitch mode has gone back to alt. So that's pretty much straight and level for us there, guys. With speed and alt in the thrust mode annunciation, and in the pitch annunciation, we'll have straight and level flying. Now, we've got the green boxes around there to alert us of a change, and now they've disappeared. So here we are, guys. We are maintaining 290 knots and flight level 200. In fact, you can see here I've selected 291. by accident. Very good, guys. Similarly for a descent, it's pretty straightforward. Set your new flight level, click flight level change. You'll see that when the mode's engaged, the button goes green as well, but that's not where you check it. Where you check it is on the flight mode annunciator. Now, nothing's happened just yet, but the thrust mode annunciation has changed to idle. You'll see it here over in the right hand side, the N1 is going back to idle, i.e. idle thrust. The aircraft is going to start losing speed, so what it does is it pitches down to flight level change speed, which we said was 290 knots, and the aircraft descends. There's 1,000 to go. You'll see the rate start to reduce, and to keep your eyes on the thrust mode annunciator, this has already changed to thrust ref to increase thrust, and this one should change to hold flight level 180 when we get there. So keep your eyes on that, guys. We should be there very shortly. You can see with 200 feet to go now, the rate is reduced to less than 1,000 feet a minute. And there we are, level at flight level 180. I know that we're there because the flight mode annunciator has changed. The thrust mode has gone back to speed, i.e. this amount of thrust with the auto throttle engaged will hold 290 knots. Halt at flight level 180 is going to hold flight level 180. Now you can see here the autopilot is leveled off at flight level 181 or 18,100 feet, and that's just purely the accuracy of the flight simulator at the moment. Hopefully Microsoft and Asobo will be working on some updates in the future, or even some third-party content would be nice. We don't have the luxury of the PMDG add-ons just yet, but hopefully they will be around the corner. So that's basically how you do a level change or an altitude change in this mode here, flight level change. There's another mode, basic mode I can show you very quickly, which is called vertical speed, and that's to do with this part of the MCP or the mode control panel. So if you want to descend at a shallower rate or a faster rate, if you want to be in charge of the rate of climb or descent, you do it in vertical speed. Similarly, you do it by first of all changing the altitude selector. We're going to go down to 16,000 feet or flight level 160, and then we're going to go ahead and press vertical speed. So, first things first, by pressing vertical speed, you'll see the vertical speed window open, and this bit's gone green to tell you you're doing it. If I go back to the primary flight display, this is the most important part which I told you about, you can see our pre-selected altitude, or our commanded altitude, is 16,000 feet. We're currently at 18,100, so we've got about 2,000 feet to go. Speed on the thrust mode annunciation hasn't changed, but in pitch, this is the most important bit, the pitch mode has changed to VS, which stands for vertical speed. Now, to initiate the climb or descent in vertical speed, once you've selected your altitude and press vertical speed, you just dial up the rate you want. So we're making a descent and we want to do it at 1,000 feet a minute. You just set 1,000 feet per minute. And there we go, down at 1,000 feet per minute. I can just draw your attention here to this magenta bug on the -1,000. That tells us what we're commanding. All the magenta stuff on the primary flight display and even on the nav display is what you're commanding. Actual is where the white lines are, and that's a bit of Boeing philosophy right there. Now, you'll see our speed is starting to increase. What we would see in the real plane is the thrust coming back, because the thrust mode is in speed. Therefore, the thrust should be reducing to maintain our desired airspeed. Again, this isn't entirely accurate on the flight simulator point of view. It should be maintaining 290 knots. Nevertheless, we are doing a nice descent. We asked for 1,000 feet a minute, and we're getting about 1,000 feet a minute. I'm just going to increase that a little bit down to 2,000 feet a minute, so that we can begin to complete our descent a little bit quicker. Now, once we reach 16,000 feet, there or thereabouts, this will change to Alt, and it should begin to maintain our flight level of 16,000 feet. You see here our speed has come up to 330 knots. Our bug is down here at 290 knots. And what should have happened is the autopilot in thrust mode should have reduced the thrust a little bit. We're still sitting at 62% N1. That should probably have been reduced to idle by the autopilot flight director system. But once again, this is probably a glitch that we're hoping to see ironed out. Once we get level, maybe the autopilot flight director system should reduce the thrust back to 290 knots. Just keep an eye on that and see what happens. So there we are, guys. Our pitch mode is Alt, and we're level at 16,000 feet. Be careful if you're going to do a climb in vertical speed, because what you'll see, like you saw in the descent there, the thrust control is a little bit off, and it will give you a slightly different airspeed. The reason I say in a climb is because in a climb, you really should be, auto thrust should be adding thrust, but it's not really doing a great job of it. So you could find yourself in a low speed situation. So to keep it simple, I would be using flight level change on the 787 at the moment for your climbs and your descents, and heading select for your turns left and right. Guys, I hope you've found the content decent. Please leave a comment and let us know of any feedback, and have a good time in the skies.